This has been happening, and I accept it's been happening on the Tory government's watch. This wokery, this nonsense, this clamour to teach kids all this... Look, it's straightforward. Kids under the age of 9 should just know you're a boy or a girl.
The Times and the Mail have both splashed on this sex education guidance coming in the next 48 hours. We've been ringing the Education Department all morning trying to find out what the facts are about what's on the front of the Mail and the Times. They're refusing to comment. Really, really hard to work out what's going on. The Times says that there's still a bit of cabinet opposition and it's to be discussed today. Why is this on the front of the Daily Mail and the Times and being reported by us as news when we're not quite sure what the hell's going on?
It's on the front of the Telegraph as well, actually. Well, because it's significant.
Yes.
Is it?
Yes, it is.
But
it is.
But why is it significant?
Because
is it because the education...
Can I speak?
Hang on.
Am I allowed to answer?
Because I think Andrew will speak for a lot of viewers here.
Yeah,
so let's hear the case for...
Some common sense.
Right.
We want the government are going to say, and they're talking about it's going to be debated in Cabinet, it's agreed. It will be agreed.
Right.
There'll be no debate because you can't find a Tory minister who doesn't think what's been going on is madness. It will be agreed. You're not going to tell kids under the age of 9 that there are 72 genders. You're going to say, yes, it can happen. You're going to say you're a boy or you're a girl. Hello, hooray, alas.
Right, look,
the Labour leader has difficulty with this, by the way. So thank God we're going to teach kids in schools the right stuff.
Right, there are essentially three answers here. Mm-hmm. One is the Education Secretary is admitting the UK Conservative government got it wrong for 14 years. 14 years of getting it wrong if this is required now. It's actually, I think it'll apply in England. Wales and Scotland set their own
sex education rules, yep.
2, have kids really under 9 been taught about sex in this way? Explicit lessons for those under... Has this really been happening?
No.
In schools? And third,
really?
And the answer is there's a general election coming, so the government has to feel it's doing something, and it would rather we were discussing this manufactured row than more than 3 million people relying on the charity of food parcels because poverty and inequality have exploded
Avoiding the point. Completely avoiding the point.
Yes, you are
completely avoiding the point.
Has it been
We're going to
happening?
have some common sense.
Has it been happening?
At last, hooray.
Has it been
good for Gillian Keegan.
So children will not be given sex education until they're at least 9 years old. Pupils must be taught about the reality of biological sex.
Yeah.
Schools are no longer allowed to teach contested ideas such as there are 72 different genders. Schools will be banned from delivering sex education of any type before the age of 9, year 5. The content of sex education lessons must be based on scientific fact. That means no gender ideology to be taught as fact. And if that subject arises, it must be taught that it is a contested belief, and parents will be given the right to see the material that their children are being...
Susanna, if only we could speak to a former Education Secretary, I think it was called Children's Secretary at the time, and if only we had one here with us today who could tell us...
Well, funnily enough, we've managed to get one in at short notice this morning. Ed Balls, former Education Secretary, Schools Secretary. Do you remember a time when children were taught that there were 72 different genders?
Well, I would like to see an example of this being taught in a classroom to 6- and 7-year-olds. Look, I'm not going to say it's never happened, but the idea that this is widespread practice across our primary schools is just really nonsense. And what will actually happen in primary schools is the children will learn about in circle time, about getting on and relationships and how people live together and what happens when people have rows and arguments, and then they'll learn about families. And then over time, as you go into secondary school, you then get on to learning about the biology of sex and then also those very important things which you learn about mutual respect and about consent and about photographs. And the thing which worries me is that actually our children these days, compared to our generation, are being exposed online to images at a much younger age than ever happened.
That's the problem.
And are we really saying that if kids are confused, aged 8, 9 and 10, and they say to their teacher, what does this mean? The teacher says, I'm not going to talk about it. Of course they're not. So there will be a conversation. I thought everything in this guidance sounds sensible. And I would say everything in that guidance is exactly what is going on
already.
In 100%, 99.9% of schools across the country.
I don't think that.
So this is.
I don't think that's right.
I know, but if I said to you, Andrew, give me some evidence.
Well, I'm not a teacher. I'm not a parent either.
So
but
I've spoken to thousands of head
teachers
teachers and teachers.
What, in the last year?
Not in the last year.
No. And this has been happening, and I accept it's been happening on the Tory government's watch. This wokery, this nonsense, this clamour to teach kids all this. Look, it's straightforward. Kids under the age of 9 should just know you're a boy or a girl.
Yeah, but I think every teacher
don't need to know about 72 genders.
Will teach kids.
I wrote
they just are boys and girls. It's just there.
About 4 or 5 years ago, I wrote a piece in the Mail saying we've got to 56 genders on Facebook. I said one more, and we're at the Himes 57. No, but now it's 72. And this is all being created by organisations like Stonewall. It is not moral panic.
You're creating a moral panic.
It isn't. It is.
You're pretending there's a problem that there is.
20,000 primary schools in our country. 20,000 plus primary schools in our country. How many primary schools do you think?
I don't know. But I don't think there should be any.
It sounds like you do.
No, there shouldn't be any.
You don't know, but you keep making big, bold assertions. This is it. It's
but
not
to be
based
fair
on
to
reality.
Andrew, it's not Andrew. This is exactly what the government is briefing.
Yeah.
That this is going on in primary schools.
And you know it is a government that wants culture wars and to try and divide and rule.
Because of course the Labour Party leader has a problem about this. Because the Labour Party leader seems to think that 99% seems to think that 1% of women can have a penis. This is the Labour leader has this view. This is this nonsense that has to be put to bed and go away.
I think that what viewers, parents want is clarity.
They do.
And
you're not going to get it. That's right. That's
part of our purpose is to give clarity on this.
But you know the briefing to the papers in this way when you can't get anybody from the Department for Education. It's not about clarity. It's about creating.
She will do
a version.
I predict the education sector will do the broadcast round. We have cabinet today. She'll be doing the broadcast round tomorrow.
And she'll bring clarity. Well, we can ask Chris Philp, who is the minister this morning, whether he has any clarity on this.
But you don't know.
You can ask him what's going on in his own children's schools. I don't have children, Ed. I don't visit primary schools.
Of course, it's always worrying when people assert something is happening, and then when you ask what's the evidence, say they haven't got any. But presumably the Education Secretary has some evidence.
I'm sure she has.
So she could say to us, how many examples have they had of teachers teaching things which are unacceptable?
I'll give you some examples. A report by the think tank Policy Exchange found last year that schools were routinely allowing children to switch their gender in the classroom without parental consent.
And how young are those kids?
And Rishi Sunak has become concerned that gender identity is being embedded within schools as an uncontested...
The
this whole change of the pronouns, the whole use of this pronoun.
The Policy Exchange is a very right-wing ideological think tank.
Actually, it's
not right-wing. Are there any figures there?
Not in this particular line. Just routinely.
Well, routinely doesn't even... That's not even suggesting it's occasional. It's happening a lot.
Yeah. I definitely think that we need to get a grip on what our children are being taught about sharing of images. I do worry, as you say, there's been a complete shift in what children have access to. And when we were taught sex education, pornography was something that, I remember at my school, there was a magazine left in a car park and everyone was like, oh, my goodness. Now it's on their phones in their pockets. And it can be, images are shared and probably that there is a very sensitive discussion to be held.
And there was an interesting discussion yesterday,
to be had about what you do if you come across that on your own phone.
There was an interesting discussion in Parliament yesterday. They had a debate in Westminster Hall about smartphones and kids and access to smartphones, and many Tory MPs saying, like Miriam Cates saying, they shouldn't have access to them before they're 14 because of the images they get on them.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of parents who wish there was a phone they could give their children before the age of 14, which had access to none of this
stuff. Which has a filter.
Stuff. Yeah.
So you have to filter into it rather than out of it, which they talked about years ago.
Yeah. But that is the problem. It's not what is taught in schools. And there is just this impression, you occasionally get protests outside schools, Sometimes it's parents of deep religious faiths coming from lots of different religions, or people who just believe in conspiracy theories. And I actually think those people who protest outside schools are those whose kids need the education most of all, because they're not going to get it at home.
But to be really clear, Andrew, I mean, I have no problems with what they're doing. And I think it's totally right that you should teach gender ideology is contested. And it's quite right that you have proper guidelines and the parents should know what's going on. All I'm saying is, I think for the vast majority of head teachers, they'll think we do this. And most parents will think, I know, but actually, these things, I've heard no sign of it happening with our kids, and we create this idea that somehow there's this school somewhere else, and these teachers somewhere else are doing these terrible things.
Well, let's see if
it's none of our lived experience.
Let's see if the text and emails coming to your programme from parents who say it is happening.
Exactly.
Because I'm sure they will come in.
I've got a lot of time for Gillian Keegan, the Education Secretary, on these issues. She's pretty sensible. She's tried to keep away from culture wars and trans wars. And that guidance just sounds kind of common sense. But it sounds like what is happening now.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You're absolutely spot on, Andrew, that our viewers who have this experience give the best evidence.
Yeah.
Joe emails in, I'm a teaching assistant in a primary school. Children are not taught sex education before the age of 9. Children are not taught about 72 genders. Children are taught about relationships.
Of course.
Simone, I'm a primary school teacher. There is no way schools are routinely teaching sex education before year 5 anyway. We follow recognised schemes that teach relationships, how babies grow and puberty, but sex is not discussed until the end of junior school. Melanie, I'm a secondary school teacher who has never taught 72 genders. I'm incensed by all this. Exactly. If they actually knew what was happening in schools, that might help. Parents have to sign a consent letter beforehand. Kieran, I can confirm under-9s in multiple schools in the Northwest have tick sheets where they select their gender out of 72 choices. My child and our friends' children in other schools are subject to this. Looks like it's happening.
Hang on. 3 of those people knocked you down.
One is too many. One is too many. And one is too many. And there'll be more of those, and one is too many, Kevin. One is too many.
Yeah, you've got to tackle that, but do not pretend there's a widespread problem.
It is.
Interesting. Very interesting.
They're onto something.
More experiences coming in.
How does Kieran know this is happening in multiple schools in the Northwest? Does he,
But it's happening in his kids' school.
Sells the sheep.
Yeah, but apparently it's happening in multiple schools in the Northwest.
Presumably, he's got mates and friends, and they're talking about it.
Maybe he just read the Daily Mail.
All the others said they were working in schools. Kieran doesn't. Maybe Kieran does.
Well, he's got children in
Kieran does.
What are you suggesting, that Kieran's lying?
If he said it happened in my 7-year-old's classroom, then I would think, well, that's really serious. But if it's happening in multiple schools in Northwest Wales...
Well, I'm sure Kieran is watching and listening. He can enlighten us.
I would love to know from Kieran, the nature of his survey.
Kieran, get back in touch.
Yeah.
Definitely. Right, and we will be speaking to a teacher after 8, because we all need a lesson in this.
Top story this morning, it's understood the government will soon be providing schools with new guidance on sex education, including stopping the teaching of gender ideology as fact.
But what is going on in our classrooms? Let's find out from someone who is there regularly, the head teacher of All Saints Catholic College, Andrew O'Neill. Very good morning to you. How old are the pupils at your school?
Well, we're a secondary school, so we teach pupils from age 11 through to age 16.
Right. What are you currently teaching your year 7 pupils, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, so we teach children in year 7 about relationships and sex education as per the current government guidance on RSHE. So the guidance that was released a couple of years ago, we updated all of our schemes of work to be in line with that. OK, so what happens about gender ideology? There is this idea that schools are teaching that there are 72 different genders. And some people have got in touch to say, yes, they get a letter and it has a tick box on it and pupils can tick which gender they are. Is that something you recognise? That's not something we currently do. I mean, I think that I've heard some of these statements come out from government and politicians. I think in the profession, I haven't seen evidence of that or heard of any schools doing that. I think for us, the way in which we approach RSHE and the teaching of this is that we're preparing children for the world around them and what that world looks like.
Yeah, but I suppose, so part of the new guidance is that if gender ideology is taught, the child must be at least 13 years old, so well into secondary school, and it must be taught as a contested belief. Is that something which would change the way that you teach your children, or is that something that you feel you're already doing?
Well, I think the first thing to say on this is that the guidance hasn't been released. So we, as a head teacher and as a school and all head teachers, we need to read exactly what that guidance states. And, you know, there'll be headlines about this and there'll be certain things that are put out there. And I think we as a profession need to look at it very, very carefully, because often there'll be caveats and there'll be footnotes to the guidance that the government put out, that they always do. But my fear on this is, and what I really, really hope isn't happening, is that we know that this has been used as a political football between politicians over the past number of years. And if government are releasing guidance and schools become that political football, then I think that'd be a bit disappointing, to be honest. And
from what you've seen in the newspapers, I know you'd have looked at it this morning before talking to us, is there anything which worries you? Is there anything being reported which you're not already doing? Are there any parents who've complained to you about what you are currently doing? Do you need new guidance?
So I think Justin Greening did some brilliant cross-party work on this a couple of years ago. I think she worked specifically with Angela Rayner on it, and they updated the guidance. It must have been about 6 or 7 years ago, and that was some really, really good work. I think how we approach RSE here, and it's been my experience in every school I come across, we approach it really sensitively, and we know that for some children, some families, these are difficult conversations to have. And, you know, I have to await what they're saying in this guidance. There are societal issues. You know, I've been on the programme recently talking about mobile phones, and, you know, children do get access to sexual content earlier than, say, the age of 13, and there's rumours about, you know, explicit sexual content that will be taught at that age. So we need to look at that and say, well, is that a reality against the backdrop of what teenagers experience when they're, you know, a bit earlier than that?
Andrew O'Neill, thank you so much for teaching us this morning about what is taught in schools.
And I'm sure we'll talk to you again when we actually get this guidance and we can find out if it's making a difference in your school. Thank you so much